So let's talk about games. People love to play games, from board games and video games to Marco Polo and Card Wars. We make a toy out of just about everything we touch, and that includes language. From sounds to words to whole sentences, language is a big adventure. I'm Moti Lieberman, and this is the Ling Space.
Welcome to the Ling Space.
So play is just part of our nature. Like cats with boxes, we use whatever we have at hand to create games. So maybe it's no surprise that wordplay is really common all over the world. There's a bunch of different kinds of word games, and they draw from all different parts of language. Some of the more common ones play with the phonemes and syllables of the words involved. Tongue twisters are a great example of this. The point of a tongue twister is to come up with something that's deliberately hard to say, especially quickly or a few times in a row, like bacon pancakes, making bacon pancakes. But languages use sounds differently, right? So depending on the language, you'll find different things hard to say. So imagine you're in a language that really cares about how long you pronounce your consonants and vowels for, like Finnish. In Finnish, the phrase, idiot, don't hit, beer spills, is this. Aljö, aljö, ylia laikky. Or you can go to something like Czech, where some dastardly villain has stolen all of the vowels and left you with this tongue twister. Strč prst skrsk. You can also switch sounds around to give you something that's called a Spoonerism. These are named after the Reverend William Spooner, who was sort of notorious in 19th century Oxford for absent-mindedly saying things like, "You hissed my mystery lecture," instead of "missed my history lecture," or "our shoving leopard," instead of "our loving shepherd." Although he probably didn't do it on purpose, a lot of humor can come out of switching sounds around like this, like telling someone that they have mad banners, or offering them some sweet, tasty belly jeans. And this isn't just funny in English either. In Finnish, the process known as sananmunnos takes Spoonerisms to a whole other level. The idea is still to swap sounds around, like musta kania, black rabbit, turning into kasta munia, baptize eggs. But there's all sorts of things going on in Finnish phonology, and they have to be accounted for too. So it cares about vowel length. If a vowel is longer or shorter, it changes the meaning of the word. But Finnish also doesn't like its sounds getting around all over the mouth. No, it likes vowel harmony. It wants the vowels to be pronounced all in the front or in the back of the mouth. So if you want to play this game, you have to obey the rules of Finnish too. Your sound swap is going to influence the rest of the word. So something like brutto nyrki, or gross fist, becomes nytty bryrki, which doesn't mean much of anything, but it shows you how it works. We wanted to give you some examples here, but the resulting words end up being usually pretty off-color, and we didn't want to offend any Finnish people. And that just proves another fact about human beings, which is that dirty jokes are popular the world over. Anyway, the point here is that if you skipped vowel harmony and said something like nytto, that would be unacceptable. Word games have to fit the sound patterns of your language. So you can have a lot of fun with sounds, but you can also play around with the written versions of language. Like palindromes, which is when a word or phrase is written the same forwards and backwards. So like pop, or bimo bomb, or go hang a salami, I'm a lasagna hog. So swapping letters like that is great for English, but Japanese doesn't work the same way. English uses an alphabet, writing more or less sound by sound, whereas Japanese uses syllabaries, so writing syllable by syllable. So how do you make a palindrome in Japanese? Well, you just flip whole syllables around, getting something called kaibun. So look at something like natsumade matsuna, or don't wait until summer. With the kanji characters in there, it's hard to tell that anything cute is going on. To get to the bottom of things, you need to use the syllables, and you can use one of the Japanese syllabaries for that. In hiragana, it looks like this, and that's much more clearly a mirror image, syllable by syllable. But you have to use the syllabary. If you write it out in English, you get something like this, which, if you read it backwards, gives you an ustam and an ustam, which isn't cute at all. You could also play games with the way individual letters get pronounced in your language, and we see this a lot in how we text, like R, or see you, or anyone. A kind of French wordplay called allographe makes full sentences out of letters, like c'est occupé, or it's occupied, or Hélène est née au pays grec. Helen was born in the Greek country. Even Mozart tried his hand at this game, writing j'ai assez obéi à elle. I have obeyed her enough. Okay, so you can joke around with sounds and symbols, but you need to start playing with meanings before you can get to one of the most loved and most maligned types of wordplay of all time, puns. These come in many forms, and some of the more popular ones have even gotten their own names. So you have malapropisms, where you switch one word for another word that sounds like it. So like poots and bladders instead of shoots and ladders, or calling someone a wolf in cheap clothing instead of sheep's clothing. You also have portmanteaus, where you blend two different words in order to make a new word, like putting together rainbow and unicorn to get rainicorn, or putting together bubblegum and gumption to get bubble gumption. Some portmanteaus have even become their own words, like cyborg from cybernetic and organism, or emoticon from emotion and icon. One type that's been gaining in popularity is the so-called dad joke, which takes sound overlaps and double meanings to create some groan-worthy humor. Try something like, I was wondering where the sun had gotten to, but then it dawned on me. But this isn't limited to English. Japan has dad jokes too, with pretty much the same name, oyaji gyagu, which is dad gag. Here's one that's easy to get as an English speaker. Tarantula no aji wa nan desu ka? How does a tarantula taste? Suppai da, which means sour, but you can hear the suppai da crawling through the joke. Puns can be dividing, but I love them. It's just fun to see how people play around with their words. Whether or not the humor works for everyone, most wordplay is trying to be funny, and so you often get the same kinds of stuff. Jokes usually work because they twist our expectations or surprise us with something unpredictable, right? No one expects an actual weapon when someone says they play an axe. Wordplay isn't always just fun and games though. Our languages define our communities, and so how we play around with language can define us too. A lot of the ways knowledge and culture have been transmitted down over time is through the oral tradition, and wordplay can help us remember culturally salient information. Like, take the traditional Jewish game of dreidel played on Hanukkah. In this game, you spin a top with 4 sides to it, and every side has a letter, Nun, Gimel, He, or Shin, standing for Nes Gadol Hayasham. That means a great miracle happened there, which is exactly what you want to remember on a holiday. Except, if you're playing in Israel, you swap the letter Shin for Pei, standing for the word Po, because the miracle didn't happen there, it happened here. Language play is also used as a subversion of traditional authority or to build cohesion in marginal groups. These groups construct whole systems of playful grammar and vocabulary known as argos. Let's take a look at one particular well-known example, Cockney rhyming slang. In rhyming slang, you get a coded set of rhymes to refer to regular English words. Like, the word stairs would be replaced by something totally unrelated to stairdom, but that rhymes with it, like apples and pears. The idea here was to conceal your goings-on from prying ears, especially if what you were doing was a little less than legal. This is just one of the many argos that have arisen in communities around the world. These languages have wordplay at their roots, but they get used to prevent the uninitiated from understanding secret communications. French verlan is a good example. It came together in French prisons in the 1800s, got a big counterculture revival in the 1960s, and now has made it into French hip-hop culture. Where rhyming slang uses rhymes, verlan swaps syllables to give you an upside-downy kind of speech. So let's say you want to mention your brother, but you want to do it in code. Well, brother in French is frère, so first you chop it in two and add a vowel if you need one, so frère. Then swap them around to get roufré, and then lop off that final vowel to get your finished verlan word, rouf. Which kind of sounds like a bark, which I guess is extra convenient if your brother happens to be a dog. Or, for some marginalized groups, different languages have led to different argos. So it's been common historically for homosexual communities to have their own language systems based on wordplay, like Swardspeak in the Philippines or Polari in the UK. But a really interesting example of this comes from South Africa, where two different argos have developed. You have Gael for Afrikaans speakers, but then you also have Isinkumo, which was based on Zulu. They're from different backgrounds, so there's different sets of words to play with. So even if we like to mess around with language, the grammars in our heads still give us rules to play by. And if we really want to be adventurous, we can turn our game serious and create new systems to keep outsiders from figuring out what we're getting at. Which, when you think about it, is pretty radical. So we've reached the end of the Ling Space for this week. If you didn't groan too loudly at our dad jokes, you learned that wordplay exists for any part of language, from sounds to words to meanings. That even when we frolic about in language, we still obey the rules. That we use wordplay to help us remember things about our culture, and that marginalized groups can use systems of wordplay to help define their community. The Ling Space is produced by me, Moti Lieberman. It's directed by Delelise Prévost, and it's written by both of us. Our editor is Georges Coulombe, our production assistant is Stéphane Hurtubise, our music is by Shane Turner, and our graphics team is Atelier Muse. We're down in the comments below, or you can bring the discussion back over to our website where we'll have some extra materials on this topic. Check us out on Tumblr, Twitter, and Facebook, and if you want to keep expanding your own personal Ling Space, please subscribe. And we'll see you next Wednesday. Octe ithwe uye ende.